I'm an addict. How's everybody doing today? Right on. This gentleman that's going to share with you this morning is a guy that I used with, and we have a very close, special relationship. And when I had about 2 years clean, he walked through the door, and I was like, "Holy shit, that's," and I couldn't believe it. He looked over and he walked up and he did one of those. Well, if this guy can do it, I can do it. And it's been an amazing journey for both of us. And there's just something for me very special about knowing somebody in both worlds and having the friendship and the relationship we have today. And he's an amazing gentleman. I feel privileged to be up here to introduce him. And with that, I'll give you Jon U.
I'm an addict, and my name is Jon. Questioning what I did when I made that application. First off, I would like to thank the Mountaineer, Regional Service Committee for selecting me. And I keep having all these things going through my head about, for one, why did I do it? I didn't tell my wife or any of that, and I just said, okay, it's God's will, I'll send it in. And the reason I think that in my heart that I wanted to share my story, and it is my story, is that, I generally don't show a lot of emotions. I cannot talk about this stuff without showing you what it is. When I'll get around to it in a little bit, but the message is hope, the promise is freedom. I had no idea when I came into these rooms. My story is very similar to a lot of folks. I do like to share a little bit about what it was like and the path that I took. I don't know if I took it or if it was given to me, but I'm a kid that my earliest memories of childhood have no mom and dad. It's just mom and my brother and me, and the other pieces and visions of my childhood are the classic broken home where mom is arguing with dad, and I and my brother are the kid that is the in the middle, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever years old, and that went on for a long time. And I always wondered, where do I belong and what's going on, I never ended up staying in one place for a long time. As a kid, we'd live here for a couple of years, lived there for a couple of years, but at one point my mom did get remarried, and we moved in with my stepfather, and we had a little bit of a family unit, I guess, in that situation. As a kid, I grew up as, for one, I was always the shrimpy kid. I was the little kid in school, little redheaded kid, and my brother was my older brother, and he was, my bigger brother, and I'm not sure exactly where it started, but what I learned as a child was that when I show my emotions, I become vulnerable. And I did not like that. I did not like being made fun of from the other kids. And I did not like to be vulnerable because now I can be hurt. And so as, from the elementary age, and it happened with my father and my mother as well, I did not like to see them see the sobbing, soaking little kid sitting there saying, "Why isn't my dad coming to get me?" Why am I still waiting here at 10 o'clock at night? Because my dad was supposed to come get me on Friday. And that hurt. So my goal as a little kid was to turn that shit off. And that, I proceeded to try to learn to turn that shit off. And nothing really worked very well. I was always in trouble. I'm sort of kind of proud. I was, expelled from school in 4th grade. And then, and I was a, angry, emotional little kid, and the teacher said something I didn't like. I picked the chair up and you threw it at the teacher, right? And that was, seemed like a good choice. And that was the 4th grade. And the reason I remember is because we moved the next year and I went to a new school. But one of the things that, happened in that year was that they started, taking me to see people to try to figure out what's wrong with this kid, And part of that, I didn't remember until very long into recovery. One of the things one of the biggest little like, oh shit, here it comes, was, they said, okay, this kid's got, I think they said I have, ADHD. And, from that point on, I'd pack I'd get my lunch packed and my mom would put my little pill in my little lunch, and I'd go to school and I'm supposed to eat my lunch and take my pill. And I don't know how long I did that. I don't know if I did that very long at all, if I did it much, but somewhere along the lines is like, oh, I got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday to save up for Friday. And that's, and I did not remember that until much, much later, and it's like, wow, So the thing that I was trying to figure out is, okay, so if one works, how about 4 or 5? And I don't know. They continued to take me to see people to see what's wrong with them. But I'll kind of skip ahead a little bit. Through the process, my brother and I talk a little bit about my brother because directly and indirectly, he has a lot to do with me learning how to love again. And understand that. Somebody last night talked about what this program is about, and this program is about love. So as kids growing up, it was my brother and I against the world, and when we were alone, it was my brother against me. And, we had the classic, he was only a little bit over a year older than I was, and we had the classic relationship of, that's my brother to kick the shit out of. That is not your brother. That's, and that's the way we, and we did try to kill each other. My mother says it did not happen particularly this way, but my brother and I, we would go to extremes, and I don't know if they were we're 10, 11-year-old boys just trying to kill each other. One grabs a knife, the other one grabs a baseball bat, and we see who wins. And so in my mom's, she didn't really know what to do with us. So her solution, my stepfather and my mother were going to move and into a new home, and the way I remember it was my mom sat my brother and I down, and she said, okay, we're going to be moving, and I can no longer handle you two boys together. So one of you is going to go live with your dad. The other one's going to go live with me. And Johnny, since you're the youngest, you get to pick. And that's the way I remember it. She says it didn't happen that way. And who knows? I made that choice very quickly and very clearly. I wanted to stay with my mom, and there was a reason for that. And the reason for that was, the reason for that was that, I did not want to live with my dad and my stepmother, and that, maybe it might have been my ability to manipulate my mother. I don't know. But I did not want to go live with my dad. So my brother went to live with my dad, and my brother paid a very, very heavy price, off and on. So we moved into the new home, and I was doing my thing, and I was your classic little redheaded rugrat muddy kid, and I'd go and get in my trouble and everything. But somewhere along the line, my stepfather, who was an alcoholic that went to meetings and didn't go to meetings, went to meetings and didn't go to meetings, and he never achieved too much of a long period of sobriety until he passed away. He did die sober, but my stepfather, he had a cabinet that was over the refrigerator, and I wanted to know what that was about. I knew that the cabinet over there, first thing that was in there was cigarettes, and the other thing in there that was alcohol. And I was willing to steal the cigarettes. I wasn't willing to steal the alcohol. But I did want to find out about it. And I had one of my buddies and I, and we were like, okay, let's figure this out. And so we decided that we're going to go to Kroger. We're gonna get some 42 proof Kamchatka vodka. And we both stole a fifth, and we walked out. We're 12-year-old boys, and we're stealing shit from Kroger. And but that was my first use. And my first use, we went out to the woods. The way it happened was, we went out to the woods, said, let's have a chugging contest. I knocked my bottle back, I finished it, I put it down. I'm 12 years old, I had my first blackout, my first ride in the police car, my first vomit in the police car. And it was like, okay, well, this is good, let's get going, man. To some degree, that was like, okay, that was kind of the way it went. We were off to a good start, and I'm 12 years old, and it's like, okay, where are we going to get more? How often can I go to Kroger? But which became a problem. But my disease, from that point on, really, it seemed to progress very quickly. I started, trying this and trying that and trying to come up with some combinations of this and that. And, at one point, I came home one night and, I was pretty well loaded. And my stepfather was pretty well loaded, and my stepfather and I got into a fist fight in the living room. My mom, we had the big old phone, and she picked up the phone and she threw the phone at me and said, and then things got bad, But the end of that is that that was pretty much, it happened very quickly. By this time, I am 14 years old. My brother is already out of the house, at my dad's house, and they're already on the way of institutionalizing him. And the solution is that I go live with my father. And I'm going to make one statement about this. By the time I moved in with my father, I was 14 years old, and I was 6'2", and I was 165 pounds. A lot different. I heard somebody in this room, I know he's in here, talk about stuff like that. And I've never understood how to move past some of that stuff, because it hurts. And it doesn't hurt on the outside. And, somebody in this room made a comment, well, he did the best he could with what he had. Because I know his background too. My dad thought he was going to beat the disease out of me. I mean, that's, and it did not work. I moved in with my father, and my disease was in full-blown daily use. The greatest thing to my disease when I moved in with my father and my stepmother was my stepmother had a lifelong condition that gave her pretty much full access to a lot of drugs. A lot. So many that she had no idea how much she had. She had no idea when more were gone. She just knew that she needed to either call the doctor and get more. And it was good old days. And from that point on, 14 years old, and I'm doing, I have no specific types of drugs that I used. It was all of them, whatever you had. And I was looking for something that made me feel, well, actually just the opposite. I was looking for something that made me not feel. And that was something that was very hard to find. Never quite get there. Part of my using and my background was I tended to use a lot more than I really should. It got me in a lot of trouble. I became, when I would use, I would become violent, and I would get in a lot of trouble. I would get arrested. I would hurt myself and others. But as being the little kid that cried a lot and didn't like to show what he was doing and what was going on, through the progression, I figured out that if I put up this, part of my story is, putting on this facade of this guy that's a tough guy, I was dumb and fearless, but I also knew that if you thought I was dumb and fearless and I was going to go, we'll go nose to nose. I don't care if you're King Kong. We are going to go nose to nose, but you will not hurt me. You won't see me shy away. You won't see me as weak or vulnerable or any of that. Because when you had those I didn't like that kind of pain. I don't know where I was going with that, but my disease took a very, very definite change. I was already a daily user. I was using everything that I could possibly get. I was getting into a lot of trouble. Finally, I got in trouble, and I was like, "Ooh, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this, because this could cause problems." And I was 16 years old. Well, I wasn't 16 years old. I was 15 years old, and I was caught driving and charged with OMBI. And I was like, oh, "Here we go. I got a problem." Yeah, that was my solution. I got a problem, and I need to go to treatment. And you know, I turned 16 years old in the first treatment center that I went to. You know, I was in a 30-day or 28-day program. I heard a lot of different miscellaneous stuff. I had a little piece in the back of my head from my stepfather going to meetings. What I heard the first time that I went to treatment was one of the people giving their little seminars about trying to educate me about the disease of addiction, or actually it was another disease that they called it, but about the disease, and the only thing I remember was, well, there's two things. There was a woman that was a counselor that was trying to help me, and then there was, the other thing that I heard was that 1 in 32 of you will be able to stay clean for a year, or sober. Yeah. So what I heard and equated to that is you're fucked. Because you are not that one. And, you know, and basically it's just the exact opposite of what I'm hoping I'm saying to you, which is hope. They gave me no hope. And that was, and deep down in my heart at that time, at 16 years old, I knew what I was. I could feel it. I couldn't stop. If I wasn't locked up or under the supervision of people that had more power than I did, I was going to use, even if I thought I wasn't. I really won't go too much into the rest of the wreckage of my disease there, but I will get to the end. And the end of my using, I'd been through 3 treatment centers at that point. I'd been through the court system. I had been through a lot of different systems. I had worn out all my welcome at most of my family's homes. They all knew him. You know, there he is. He's coming to dinner. You know, hide the shit. If I would get invited to dinner. But, you know, the end of my using was I got a job working in a restaurant, and the restaurant allowed, I was a dishwasher, and the restaurant allowed me to, you know, I had a strict six beer limit while I was on the clock. Very strict. The question was how big a glass could I find? And you know, so that was, you know, that was my job, and I lived down the road about 2 miles. I had absolutely no way in God's creation to get a license to drive. That was off the table by this point. You know, so my life consisted, I lived in a basement, and it was my father's home, and he allowed me to live in the basement. And the restaurant was up the road, and a couple miles. And, you know, it's a nice area. The basement looked out onto the river. There was no way to get from the basement to the house from inside the house. You had to go outside. And there was a reason for that. You know, and in my father's defense, he tried to do the best he could, you know, because I was not easy. So my day would begin with, you know, with me getting on my bicycle. The liquor store was, you know, about 4 or 5 miles down the road. I'd get on my bicycle, I'd ride down to the liquor store, because thank God I was old enough to buy liquor now. And I would go down to the liquor store, I could get on my bike, I could, buy what I could carry a couple things, and I would come back down and I'd pass the gas station, and I'd, save enough capability to carry a couple cans of 7-Up, and I would ride that down to my house, and I would drop that off. I'd go to work, I'd have my 6 beers, I'd have whatever else I had, because I did not just drink. That was I was always looking for the combination. That was kind of the last 6 to 9 months of my life, day in and day out. That's what I did every day. Nobody wanted to be around me. I was not a warm, fuzzy teddy bear. I thought I was a badass, and deep inside, I was a guy that was dying and didn't know what to do. I was hurting. I was so chicken shit, I could not figure out how to kill myself. I would use the way I like to use, and I would usually end up someplace other than that basement. Floating down the river in a canoe, 7 miles, 8 miles down the river, thinking, how the fuck am I going to get this canoe back up here? Because I got to go to work. And that was my life. But I tended to get into a lot of places and a lot of trouble that I didn't have any idea. My first drink was my first blackout. And I shared this one time with somewhere and about, the disease of addiction and where I had gone to. And in my disease of addiction, I lived in this basement. This basement was like 24 by 30 or something like that. It had one steel beam that went from one side to the other. In the middle of that steel beam, there was a pole. And I thought that if I could ever find somebody that was my real friend and stuff, they could maybe, we could work out a deal that when I start using, maybe they could, chain me to that fucking pole. So I'd be okay. And that's a real story. I thought that would work for the way I was. That guy was dying and couldn't figure out how to die. I'd been exposed to program and people and meetings a little bit along the way, and I knew, I don't know what I knew. What I knew at that moment, at that time, was that I was going to die. I didn't know how to die. I wanted to die. The shit wasn't working no more. It didn't matter whether I did it or didn't do it. It did not matter. I picked up the phone and I had a couple of phone numbers from a couple of people that I knew that were going to these meetings, and they were supposedly clean. We all know that shit. It's like, how clean? But anyway, and her name was Sandy. And Sandy, came and she picked me up and she took me to my first meeting. My first meeting that I went to this time around was September 21st, 1986. And, NA was a little bit smaller back then. But I don't know, along the line, I know that I showed up at the meeting. It was a nice fall day, went to this meeting, and I had no idea that I had no clue, I had no understanding of what I was going to do and how this shit was going to work, because this fucking shit just wasn't working for me. It might be working for you guys, but I'm just here because I'm hurting. I just wanted to stop hurting. And I didn't know what else to do. and I always look back to the readings, and there were some readings that they still read. And there's one, and I want to make sure I get the sentence right. And it's available to all of us. I did not want to live. I had no hope. I was living a less than human existence. There's a lot of things I did in that basement that I'm not going to talk about. I didn't think I was at that time when I walked in, I didn't think I had any value to anybody. I didn't think I was lovable. I didn't think that I had any hope at all for any kind of change. And they told me to keep coming back. And, they got me a few phone numbers, and they'd be like, oh, that's fucking great if I had a phone. And I didn't have a phone. It's really a funny thing to remember, but they gave me a roll of 10 dimes wrapped up with the clear tape, and they were like, call, find a payphone, because payphones were readily available back then. And, and for a dime, you could talk all you want, and people would answer. But there's a lot of part of many of my, when I tell my story, I tend to bounce around and I forget the chronological part of but there's a lot of things that happened during that early time of my recovery that I didn't understand that were actually happening, and it was God doing for me what I could not do for myself. I had no concept of a higher power, none whatsoever. I had a real good concept of a lower power, real good. And oddly enough, that was one of the things that said, well, if I can believe in the lower power, I can definitely believe in a higher power. Today I have, I always think about that little thing, the message is hope, the promise is freedom. Today I have more freedom and more hope than I think I've ever had in my entire life. I have been given, I've been clean for 33 years. And the only piece of that matters is today. For me, that's the only piece that matters. For the newcomer, I want to tell you, I've been given a lifetime of freedom. And it's available to us all. The fellowship was a lot smaller, and they were not nearly as politically correct as they are now. There was still a lot of egos. I still had an ego, but anyway, I was the guy that walked in. I tried to sit back in the back corner. I didn't want to talk to you. I didn't really want to do anything other than stop hurting. Fortunate for me, there were people that that gave me hope, and they didn't even have any idea that they were doing it. You know, I had this one woman who, every time I'd start walking to an NA meeting, she would eyeball me, and it was like, oh no, she is gonna fucking hug me. And you know, she was, you know, the soul of the program of Narcotics Anonymous. She had no idea what she was doing. She walked up to me and she gave me a hug, and she said, we will love you until you can learn to love yourself. And I really didn't understand that. I had no concept of what that meant. What I understood was that somebody was giving me a hug. They were touching me. Didn't like that a lot. And she told me to keep coming back. You know, I showed up at the meeting one time, and I was walking up to the door, and she was standing there. She's giving me that eye. I'm like, fucking, she's gonna hug me, and I was not on the planet. I was not on the planet, and I got right to the door, and she did give me a hug, and she looked right at it, and she knew exactly where I was. And I said, I'll come back. And I turned around and walked away. And she was there that first day at that first meeting when I walked in that door. Her name is Bev. She's passed, but she saved a lot of souls. She was a good person. You know, and I'm going to make a joke, because I got clean so long ago, Bob was still young. And I love you. You know, I'm losing my hearing, so I can't hear a frickin' word. Yeah. But I went in, you know, I started going to meetings. They told me to go to 90 meetings in 90 days or whatever. They told me to get, you know, get a basic text. They told me to get phone numbers. They told me to do a lot of things, you know, and I was still living in the basement of my dad's house. And today I believe that, you know, my higher power is God, and God was working in my life to do for me what I could not do for myself. I look back at the situation that I was in and how things were happening, and God did a really good job. Did a really good job. I didn't know where I was going to live, because I could not live in that basement, you know, you know. And I didn't have transportation. I couldn't live, you know, 10 miles from the closest meeting. You know, so within the first 10 days or so, I ended up living with my grandmother on the west side of Columbus, you know, and I went from living in the sticks with nothing, you know, except the crickets, and to living on the west side of Columbus, where you had to learn how to sleep in between the sirens, you know. And you know, my grandmother took me in against you know, my family's better judgment. You know, I learned from another guy something really simple, is that, you know, if you know, you give them a roof and somebody that knows their name and gives them a meal, they might have half a chance. And she gave me more than that. You know, the aunts and uncles in my life all came over one by one, and, you know, gave me the message that they wanted to give me, which was, you know, well, especially my one uncle, basically, you know, don't take advantage of your grandmother, is the nice way to put it. and I understood that because I had taken advantage of other people in my life and my family before. So here I am, I've got my bus pass and I'm living at my grandmother's, and I've got people in the program that are coming and willing to take me to meetings, and I get 90 meetings in 90 days, and all of a sudden, my higher power is doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. The thing that I kind of remember about coming in and staying clean the first 90 days or so is I don't remember shit. I really don't. I remember going to my meetings. I remember doing what was told, or actually suggested. Let's correct that. It was suggested. Yeah, I was told to shut the fuck up, but it was suggested. It was suggested that I do these certain things, and and I started on my. I was just. I felt like I was broken, and I thought that I was broken. What I was sick, and. So they said, you gotta get a sponsor. And so I started looking around the rooms, and, I found a sponsor, and I asked this guy to be my sponsor. His name is Mark, and he, he's still in the rooms. And I asked him to be my sponsor, and I got the response that I was not expecting. He's like, yeah, great. Be at my house Thursday, 5 o'clock. I'm cooking dinner, and then we're gonna work on steps. And it was like, damn, that was not what I was, I really wasn't looking for that kind of effort, and pretty much first couple of years I was clean, that's what I was doing, Thursday nights, 5 o'clock, I was going to his house, having a bite to eat, and we were working on the steps. And through the process, I ended up, I am grateful. I've had 3 sponsors. 2 of them are in the room, and I love them both dearly. They've both led me down this path that has given me everything. My wife was like, well, you should be spiritual and all that, and, talk about things that are spiritual, and you're the Sunday morning spiritual speaker, and I'm like, I don't know how to do anything but tell you my story. When I walked in, I thought there was something wrong with me. I thought that I was, I thought that I had done something, that I was responsible for all of this shit. And what I believe today is that I'm an addict. And that I'm sick and I'm getting better. Along the way, my higher power has changed a lot along the way. Originally, it was a really hot chick. I'd make her my higher power. But today I don't know what my higher power is. I just know that it's in every single one of you. And when I choose to listen, I can hear it. I can get it anywhere I want if I choose to listen. Today, I've gone through a lot of stuff being clean, and the best part is that I'm still learning how to live and love me. That's a process that will probably never end. I've been given the freedom from active addiction, and the understanding of freedom from active addiction is probably going to be different for every single person. For me, it is being able to stand on this stage and hear that thing ringing, whatever that is. I am truly afraid to show people my emotions. One of the reasons I gave this application to do this is to show you that I do have feelings and that we can recover and that we do get better. And there is hope, because I am exactly like you. We have way more in common than we have apart. Way more. I'll tell some of the stuff that has been going on in my life since I've been clean. How am I doing on time? Okay. I talk about my brother quite a bit, and a little bit, and my brother, my brother was an asshole, especially in my early recovery. I mean, my brother was the one that was always trying to get me high. Misery loves company. He was trying to get me high. He was the one that used my name and got me, got me arrested for, had a warrant out for my arrest. And I guess this is being recorded, but my sponsor bailed me out of jail. And I love that. But that was my brother, He was one of us. He never made it to the rooms. He did manage to kind of clean himself up a little bit and not quite go down that path the last 5 or 6 years. But he had developed cancer. And, part of my process and working steps is, somewhere along the lines, I got to make some amends, For one, when he told me he had cancer, and it was like, okay, and this went on for quite a while. And it was a long, slow program for him to pass away. And so he went through a lot of changes, but the time was coming. And there were some amends to make. I did not want to be there. I did not want to be part of that. Somebody in my life insisted that I do it because I would regret running from that. And I was sitting with my brother, and I said, I need to apologize to you for the decision that I made when we were 11 years old. And because he paid a heavy price for that decision. And he looked at me without missing a beat, without missing a second. And he said, you had no more choice than I did. And at the end of the day, I love my brother. I was there when he died. I watched him take the sheets and wrap him up and put him on the gurney and take him out at the door. And that was a moment for me that life is short. My wife has given me some of the best little coinkydink little things I ever had. And I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know how to do this. I'm clean for a long time. I don't know how to process this shit. I don't want to process this shit. I don't want to be part of this shit. And she said, this is a gift, and all you have to do is be there. And that was a miracle, to be there for my brother and to be present. And that is freedom from active addiction. That is freedom from active addiction. I went to a funeral for an addict that I didn't really know very well. I don't know, but he had come to Ripley. I know that he had come to Ripley, and he had been in treatment, and he was left out, and he graduated or whatever they call that. And he was going to long-term treatment, and they put him up in a hospital. He had a couple of nights to himself, and he died. Another addict dying and going to another addict's funeral, unfortunately, isn't anything new. But we went to that funeral, and there was a lot of people there, and it's the end of the funeral, and pretty much the NA fellowship was there, and most everybody had gone, and there were still some things going on out front around the casket and things, and so we stayed, to see what was going on. And, everything seemed to be done. And then somebody came out and said, well, I can't even remember this addict's name, but they marched these 3 little girls out in these 3 little white dresses. And these 3 little girls read their little letters to their daddy, who died of addiction and lost his battle. And that had a pretty profound feeling for me, in that, I have 3 children, and, I left out a lot of stuff about my using, but I used to describe myself as a monster. And I was an addict who was sick. My children never saw that monster. So the 3 little girls that came out, all I could think of was, God, I didn't put it into the words of freedom from active addiction. But this program has given me my life. My children have not ever seen me using. I've looked at my children. I've looked into their eyes. I've looked into their eyes when they were born. Somebody told me once, if you want to see God, look into the eyes of somebody you love. And I've seen God. I've met God. The program and my journey has taken me, up and down and up and down and up and down. I don't know why I heard it in the meeting right before I got here, but there was, somebody said something about, the clean time, and there's a gap. There's all these years, and then there's a gap, and then there's all these years. And I lived in a gap for a while. And I guess, some of the other things that have happened along the way are the gifts that I've been given. When I first asked my current sponsor to be my sponsor, he said, there's a few things you need to do. 1, you need to go down to Alena every year, to the men's retreat, and then 2, you got to go to Ripley because you're going to meet this guy, And I'm like, okay, So I go to Ripley, and I'm going to Ripley to meet this guy that's coming up from Florida or wherever he's coming up from, I've come to Ripley. I think it was my first time at Ripley, and I'm coming to Ripley to meet Benny. and I meet Benny. And Benny's a guy that had known my sponsor pretty much since they were kids, I think. And Benny, I wasn't really sure why I was meeting Benny. I don't know. I don't remember. But, I met Benny, and Benny told me, he says, I'm going to leave you with Benny. And at the time, I had not been around NA a lot. And I was just getting reacclimated after, my kids were born. I was working, got to make that dollar, got to chase this, got to chase that. And I found myself to a point where I went to a meeting and it was like, I was out of cigarettes. And it's like, I can't stop for cigarettes because they sell beer there too. So I gotta get my ass to a meeting. And so there I am with 20 years clean, and I am afraid of a grocery store again. So I'm going to meet Benny at Ripley. I've got a new sponsor, and I'm trying to get reacclimated and try, because at that point I was very lost. I met Benny. And Benny told me the story. At the time, he had said, "Well, I had 24 years clean. I was working as a counselor in a rehab, and I thought I had it all figured out." And he said, "If there's anything you hear from me right now, I wanted to tell you." And Benny went back out. Is that there's only one way to coast. I had 24, and he went on, but and he couldn't put 6 months together again, and I can't remember the topic this morning's meeting, but it's like, I gotta get out of here. But and what I learned from Benny is that there's only one way to coast, and if I keep coasting, I'm gonna die if I don't have a program. Later, I started going to those men's retreats, and my sponsor and I, he's like, "Oh, we gotta go see this guy down on the beach. We gotta go down to Daytona and see this guy on the beach." And we go down to Daytona and see this guy on the beach. And it's a guy that's holed up in a hotel room on the beach in Daytona, and it's Benny. This is years later, and it's Benny. And it's clear that Benny is not doing well. But we're there, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to meetings, and I'm doing this, and I'm getting treated for this, and I'm getting treated for that." And it's like, how many fucking doctors do you have? Do they know about each other? No, they don't. The disease is powerful. It is still alive. I heard the word vigilant in another meeting. And that's what we must be, is vigilant. That same, that was in early December, and then I think it was on the 25th of Christmas, Benny committed suicide in that room. And so my just for today, I'm clean, and I'm learning how to love, and I'm learning how to love myself, and I'm learning how to be loved. Because sometimes I don't like to be loved. I'd like to be left alone, and that's where I'm in bad company. And my sponsor, before I got up here, a couple of days ago he said it, and then he said it again. I'm speaking to the newcomer. I'll tell a little funny story about that newcomer. And so my home group, which is a really, I'm not going to say it's the best, but I will. It's the best home group in the world. and it's on Monday night, and it's the corner of Neal and King Avenue, and it starts at 8 o'clock, Monday Miracles. But completely lost my train of thought. What was it? Okay, so I go to Monday. Thank you. But I go to Monday Miracles, and you know, I generally don't. I used to not understand it, and today I understand it. You know, they'd say, "Well, how long have you been clean?" And I say, "I'm a newcomer. I'm a newcomer, and I'm still a newcomer." And one of my sponsees was sitting there with a couple of guys from a treatment center, and they were trying to figure out, you know, they were trying to figure out who's got time in the room, you know, and they're sitting there, and it's like, well, who sponsors that guy? Who sponsors that guy? It's like, well, that guy sponsors that guy, and the guys from the treatment centers, no, that's the newcomer. And I look back at that, and it's like, I don't ever want to not be a newcomer. If I'm not a newcomer, I'm a guy that thinks I know my shit. And I do not know my shit. Alone, I have no chance. You know, there's a lot of pieces that I've left out. You know, and I have, there are people in my life, you know, when I walked in, you know, I didn't have a lot of friends. I mean, I walked in, I didn't have any friends that I knew of, you know, and I was fortunate in that, you know, when I first got clean, there were people there that I used with. They took me in, they picked me up, they'd take me to meetings, they wouldn't let me off the hook. You know, people that go to meetings stay clean. Funny thing. And when I first got clean, I didn't feel that I belonged to anything. I didn't think that anybody would want me to belong to them. And I found a home. I found people that love me. You know, I learned how to love. You know, those people that didn't even know they were helping me. Beth giving me a hug. You know? Kevin just sitting there. You know? Yeah. Because the funny thing about Kevin is, you know, he and I tried to get clean together before. We went to this religious you know, and we were like, we got to get the hell out of here now. Because they aren't going to let us leave, you know? You know, the promise is hope. The message is freedom. I've been given a new way to live. And thank you.